So we've got a great speaker coming up, I'm told, because I haven't seen Philip's talk, but it comes highly recommended. So no pressure on Philip. But Philip's going to tell us all about aerials and ideas for 10 meters. I'm not going to introduce him other than that because he's going to introduce himself. So please welcome Philip.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming along. I'm Phil Miller-Tate. I'm M1GWZ, not G1GWZ as advertised. So if anybody comes here thinking I'm going to nail him for being a pirate, I'm not. I am properly licensed, and my club is the Telford Amateur Radio Society, which is based around Ashford in Surrey. It's very nice to be invited here today. Thank you for the invitation, Steve, and particularly on this auspicious occasion of the 50th anniversary. That's great. I was walking around downstairs before I came up here, and I discovered this book, the GQRP Club Antenna Handbook, which probably makes this talk redundant. Okay, but you know, if there's any questions I don't answer, go and buy the book. It looks very good to me. The latest Radcom, and I quote, says, there will be a build-a-thon, an evening social supper, talks by some well-known QRPers. It should say, and Phil Miller-Tate, but hopefully better known once I get started. The background for this talk arose from a rather longer talk, and I'm very aware of keeping it to time today, given to the Eccleford Society last year. And the purpose of that talk was we had a number of members who were fairly new to the club. Yes, we get new members, which is great. Even some quite young new members on occasions. Many of whom live in environments where they are very limited for space. And of course, the best way to, and they're interested in getting into HF. What better way to get into HF when you're limited with space than to work with small aerials? And what better way to have a small aerial than to operate at a short wavelength? And last year, of course, as many of you will be aware, 10 meters was wide open to the world. A lot of the year, it was great. Unfortunately, of course, this year, not so good. But that's how the solar cycle goes. And I think as we come over the peak of the solar cycle and the D-layer problem starts to go away, I think 10 meters is going to open up again soon. So the idea was, I only suggested 10 meters because everybody was talking about it. And again, because small and exciting when it's open. So the idea was to present some aerials for the 10-meter band for people to experiment with, using only a few simple components, and to fit in a small garden, as and when necessary, or possibly to go portable. Another thing I like to encourage. I came yesterday to a GQRP amateur radio convention, and I think I was the only one who took the time yesterday with my good friend Steve, G4VRR, to go to the sports field at the back and set up a QRP station, portable station. And we had, what, 8 QSOs across Europe in an hour and a half, something like that, which for me is fun. Okay, so that was the main point there, to encourage people to experiment, to go portable, small space, and also to remind people of this absolute truth, which should never be forgotten. Every time a radio amateur buys a commercial aerial, an angel dies. If you are not up to putting up a bit of wire on a pole, you are in the wrong hobby, to my mind. Now, okay, some people will want their step IRs. Some people will want their Yagis with so many elements they practically reaches to the transmitter at the other end. Okay, Probably not QRPers, although if you're a very competitive QRPer, which I'm not, you're probably thinking, yes, every last fraction of a decibel. I'm not. Okay. I spent a lifetime working as a research scientist, working to incredible degrees of accuracy of engineering and measurement, whatever. And so I'm well aware of the importance of accuracy and detail, but I'm retired now, so I can forget all about that and stop worrying. But make aerials. Right. What will you need? You can go on any popular internet shopping channel, perhaps one with the name named after some famous South American river, like Orinoco, or something like that. And you can buy cheap, what are usually called windsock poles, telescopic fiberglass windsock poles. Not very expensive at all. Don't do it. Okay, these are cheap. These are flimsy. You will break them easily. Fork out and buy one decent 10-meter telescopic pole. This one happens to be a SOTA beams. There's also DX Commander, of course. Spider Beam was mentioned to me as well. The other thing you don't want to do is, if you can possibly avoid it, mess about with guy wires or, you know, ropes. Get tangled, they get messed up, you're trying to hold this up while putting something in the ground if you're on your own, things like that. They become a real nuisance. If you've not come across them before, again, available from your favorite online shopping site. This, and I'm surprised the number of people haven't come across this is a soil spike or ground spike. Okay, it may not be the world's best earthing point, depending on how good your soil is, but at least it is connected to the earth. Whatever, it's got a series of very simple adjustable jaws there that will grip any pipe basically of that diameter or smaller. And what I like them for, excuse me, what I like them for is very easy to drill an extra hole, and in this case I've put a machine screw and a bolt and some washers and a wing nut as well, so I can attach other things to it, radials, for example. It's a good point for that. You screw this into the ground with the help of the supplied Tommy bar, and it's nice firm support in anything other than the very windiest conditions. This will hold your pole up. Okay, very, very useful. Definitely recommended. It leaves a significant hole in the ground. Okay, when you take it out, safety first, fill the hole in afterwards. It is exactly the right size for a small animal's paw. And if that animal falls in that hole and breaks its leg, the vet bills are not going to be cheap. All right, so safety first. That's 1,000,000 to 1 chance, of course, but everybody knows about 1,000,000 to 1 chances, don't we? We're all familiar with that. Okay, so that's a good starting point. Once you've got that, then go out and buy a cheap windsock pole, just as a secondary support. Nice, cheap, simple one. I think this is 6 meters, this particular one, just in case you want, as I say, a secondary support point for something, and buy another soil spike. You can buy plastic soil spikes, much cheaper. I mean, these aren't expensive. I think I paid about £13 for this. These are not expensive. You can buy plastic ones. They're designed to hold up beach umbrellas in sand. Okay, now I've seen them used in soil. They're cheap, they're effective. Where I live, which is a quarter of a mile from the River Thames, the Thames alluvial silt clay that covers my garden bakes like concrete in summer. Trust me, a plastic one will not go into it. So, as I say, that's what I recommend there. You'll need some RF connectors and adapters, of course. You can never have too many RF adapters. So as soon as I finish talking, go out there and buy one of everything, or collect them slowly as you go. You might want some kind of impedance matching transformer. Build your own. Okay, it's only a ferrite ring, toroid, available from your GQRP club, and a bit of wire and a few connections and a little plastic box. You know, don't go and buy a commercial one if you can avoid it. You might want a simple antenna matching unit if your rig doesn't already have one. I love this one. This is an MFJ model 16010, and the clue is in the 16010. Okay, it's just an L match, but it's designed, apart from anything else, for end fed antennas as well, and it will cope with very high input impedances. No trouble at all. And I love this. I have modified it myself slightly, but you can still find these around. There might be one out there somewhere today. An antenna analyzer is always nice to have, particularly the rig expert ones. I do love mine, but a nano VNA will do. It does that and plenty more as well at a very low price. It's a little fiddlier to get to use, but it's good. You'll also want a small can of Ingenuity and possibly a tourniquet. Tourniquet? Are we talking about lacerations in putting up aerials? No. Here's something that you may well find yourself needing to do. When you make an aerial, you may want to attach some kind of box matching transformer or whatever to the pole. Most people do this with adhesive tape. Nasty, sticky stuff, leaves sticky marks everywhere, gets tangled up, attaches itself to your clothes, leaves you trying to figure out how to break it off at the end. Now, go onto your favorite online shopping store and buy a pack of these. These are reusable silicone rubber tourniquets. Job done. Okay, you can probably go around again with that. That'll hold most things on. It's this AMU is a bit much for it, but 2 will do, and you can link them together, stuff like that as well. Buy a bunch. I find that very useful indeed. Oh, and it's when you come to take everything down, of course, it's quick release as well. No nasty sticky stuff. Okay, you'll want some wire. Ordinary stranded copper wire, insulated hookup wire, the kind of thing used, is fine for radials, if you must use radials. I prefer something a bit beefier for a radiating section. And that's something like this, 2.5, 3 millimeter diameter stranded wire. This actually comes from an electronics supply company well known for its rapid response when you place an order. No advertising here. This is what I use. Get it in pale blue or pale grey, whatever your predominant sky colour is wherever you live, and your neighbours will probably not notice it if it's sprung across the garden. Unfortunately, my neighbours did, and complained that I had the temerity to put this piece of wire up in their sky, 30 foot from the boundary, but it was their sky because they could see it. So I moved it slightly and didn't tell them, and they couldn't see it then. So that was all right. So you'll need some wire. Oh, and I'm sorry. I seem to have failed to have saved an extra a slide I put in last night. Accuracy. I've already spoken about accuracy. I am not wedded to the last 1/10 of a decibel. Okay, that's not why I do QRP, or indeed any radio. I never go above 100 watts anyway. Can't see the point. But that's just me, right? No antenna other than a stepper IR is resonant at more than one frequency. Okay. And I've seen antenna lengths, wire antenna lengths quoted to the nearest millimeter. Right. This is how I work. That's a meter. That's half a meter. That's a quarter of a meter or 10 inches in old money. Okay. That's good enough for me. What? Tweaking the length, trimming inches off the end of it to get it in tune. Can't be bothered. So I cheat. I use one of these. Okay. Oh, but they're lossy. They're lossy. Yeah. But again, you know, yesterday, 5 watts. Spain, what did we get? Spain, Slovenia, sorry, Hungary. Yeah, that's right. Poland. You know, how much fun do you need? But I appreciate other people have, you know, more interests than that. Yeah, measure the length, tweak it with that. As far as I'm concerned, if the SWR is less than 2, I'm not worried. Oh, contentious comment there. I'm not bothered. Right, okay. But often you can get it better than that. So that's what I say about accuracy. Now, you'll see some odd numbers on this. My original talk was called 10 for 10. 10 simple aerials for 10 meters. I haven't got time for all 10 today. So first of all, in my talk, my original talk, I disposed of the dipole. Needs too many supports. 3's too many. Inverted V. By the time you've actually stretched out the sides at the right angle, a decent angle, and you've secured it to the ground, and preferably had the ends of the dipole high enough that your child doesn't say, "Daddy, what's the," just as you're transmitting on the hot end. Oh, sorry, pardon me, grandchild. It takes up too much space, as far as I'm concerned. Quarter wave, monopole, 2 problems. One, needs radials. They're things you trip over when you go experimenting with aerials. 2, the radiation is from the feed point, from the bottom of the antenna, almost at ground level. You can raise it right up, of course, but almost at ground level. Right, at low angle radiation for DX, that's hardly going to get over your fence. Okay, the end-fed halfway vertical, I'm sure you've come across this before. It is a dipole, but it's end-fed, whatever, 5.2 meters for the 10 meter band. Perfect. Doesn't need radials. Counterpoise can be your coax feed line if you stretch it out across the ground a bit. Don't need more than that. People talk about, with all end-feds, about a 1:49 or matching transformer. That's all right for horizontal ones. For vertical ones that come down near to the ground, I always find that to be too much. 1:16 or 1:25 is as far as I would normally go with that. But as I say, I can actually tune with this most end-fed antennas directly, and that's just an L match. So you just need a coupler, a suitable coupler. Okay, so that's a nice simple antenna, easy to put up on one pole. Does it work? It's omnidirectional, of course, which is great. It has a reasonable low angle pattern for DX. Not much good for NVIS or nearby, whatever. This is the example of the antenna analyzer curve I got out of it. So at the frequency for which it was designed, 28.2 in this case, 1.5 SWR, that's fine. Happy with that. Have I heard DX on it? In other words, have I heard outside Europe? Heard that? Yes. Yeah, Arabian Gulf, number of times, whatever. Have I had a QRP, QSO on it? Yes. Several into Europe. No problem. When I did the whisper analysis, the band didn't open, typically, except once. and it got me through to the Canary Islands. Was it EA8BFK, I think it is. Those of you who do whisper know that if you stood on a chair facing facing the Canary Islands and spoke in a normal voice, he'd pick you up. But still, I mean, never mind. That's a signal spot. It got to there. It was found there. So it works. Now, we can go a stage further. The parasitic half-wave beam. You've got your half-wave antenna set up there. If you set up next to it at a non-critical distance, here I've said 1.5 meters, but it's not critical. If you set up a piece of wire, vertical piece of wire, about 5% longer than your radiator, it will act as a reflector. If you set up a piece of wire about 5% shorter than your radiator, it will act as a director. The great thing about it is these dimensions are not critical. This spacing is not critical. And the vertical alignment of the sections compared with the radiator is not critical. So you can do what I did, cut a piece of wire 5% longer, measure back 10% of its length, put a switch in. You can just click the switch for whether you want it reflector or director. This is using it as a reflector. You can see it's not hugely directional, but somewhat directional. It will give you about 3 dBs of gain over the half-wave antenna on its own. There's a front to back ratio of about 5 dBs, which may be useful, maybe handy, whatever. But some might think that's a useful improvement to have. If you do it as a director, it's even more effective. In fact, this will give you about another dB or so of gain, about another 2 or 3 dBs of front to back ratio, again, if you wish. And it's not too difficult to detect the directionality. So this is it set up as a reflector in the direction, in this case, in the direction of the USA, that way, and that way's Europe. Did I hear DX? Yes, I did. Did I get a QRP QSO? Yeah, not to America, but I did get a QRP QSO out of it, set up like this. Yeah, DX, 2 ticks for DX. I could hear North American and South American stations when I tested it. And then say if you want to switch the direction, you just flick the switch, it becomes a director, you're working in the opposite direction. So that's another good antenna. Now, lots of people have heard about the half square. There's been a lot said recently about the half square antenna. And there's a lot of confusion as well about how the half square antenna works. And when you understand how it works, you will also understand that it doesn't work. What you have here are two, it's vertically polarized, by the way, despite all this wire here. You have 2 vertical sections, quarter wavelength sections, spaced half a wavelength apart. And this bit of wire here is just a phasing section to drive this one with the correct phase at the correct distance from this one. Okay, from your driven one. You can either end feed it via I've said 1 to 49, but again, it might be lower, via a matching transformer there. Or there's an alternative feed point up at the corner, which is 50 ohms or thereabouts. That one works better. The problem is you have got to lead the feed line away as far as you can and as horizontal as you can. You don't want it interfering. You certainly don't want it hanging down next to this driven element. You'll have all kinds of problems. So really, that might need another support. You might get away, well, in fact, I've got away with running it sort of diagonally down to the ground. There. High voltage at the ends, so don't put them right down at the ground level. Now, here's the rub. What if the lengths aren't quite correct and you want to adjust them? Not that simple. You're going to have to adjust the length of both of the vertical sections and the length of the half wave phasing section in the middle. And that means moving the poles closer together. And worse still, gravity being what it is, this bit's going to sag. Okay? So either, given that this will sag, either if you have the two vertical sections the right distance apart, this will be too long. Or alternatively, you have this phasing section the right length, but the two radiators are too close together. Worse still, of course, when you use these poles, what you end up with is that. They will both sag inwards. Any talk you may read, and there have been articles in popular radio magazines about this being a multi-band antenna, no, it is at best a droopy dipole. Okay, yeah, it works multi-band, but it's not working as a half square is supposed to work. I have a better alternative. The half quad. Hang on a minute, that looks exactly the same. No, this is half the size of the previous one in both the X and Z directions. So 1.3 meters, an eighth of a wavelength there, a quarter of a wavelength across the top, eighth of a wavelength there. You do need radials. You need radials both at the feed point and at the other end. 8 quarter wave radials is good. Well, I say 8, 6, 4, 2 at a pinch. People always reduce the number of radials when they're doing experimental antennas. No, I usually run it with 4, I must confess. The point of this antenna is, as it's named, it's the half quad. This is a square quad antenna, which is usually one wavelength all the way around its periphery, but half of it is virtual. It's the reflection in the ground. Do we believe this can work? It does, actually. Remarkably, it does. And look at the dimensions. 1.3 meters, 2.6 meters. If you like stealth, you could build this on a wooden frame, put it at the end of your garden, hang a bit of netting on it, and tell the XYL and your neighbours it's a goalpost for the grandkids. Does it work? It's almost, surprisingly, it is almost omnidirectional. Obviously not quite. You can see that, and it's fairly high angle compared with the others. It's reasonably wide band. Again, this was designed for 28.2. It actually came out at 28.5. You can adjust the length if you want to, because these dimensions, unlike the half square, are not critical. You know, it's part of a loop, that's all. And it doesn't have to be perfectly half square. Have I heard DX on it? Yes, I have. From South America, as well as from the other side of Europe. Again, the Arabian Gulf. Have I had a QRP QSO on it to Europe? Yes, I have. 5 watts. SSB, by the way. I'm an SSB person. So 5 watts SSB. I make contacts on it. Here's the whisper pattern of it. Chunk in Europe, and I am sort of either side, Spain, and up to whichever island that is. I can't remember the name of it now. But just off the coast of Sweden there. So those are whisper spots for a fairly short whisper process. Nice little antenna. The only problem with it is you can't raise it any higher. Okay, obviously because it relies on the reflection of the ground, it's got to be at ground level. But with a reasonable ground, my ground isn't great, and certainly wasn't at the time when I tested this. It's a small antenna that actually performs rather well, and people like loops. The impedance, the feed impedance is about 100 ohms, so not too difficult there. It behaves as if it was a quad antenna. Who remembers this? Yeah, you'll remember. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong slide. Who remembers this? The joystick VFA from Partridge Electronics. The Wonder antenna, yeah. The Wonder antenna. Yes, you remember all the unsolicited comments from happy users. I propped mine up against the side of the house, and before I knew it, I'd worked all Britain. I had mine on the kitchen table, connecting it to my transceiver when I accidentally worked all Europe. I had mine in my cellar. It wasn't even connected to the radio, and I still managed to get the USA. Yeah, all these unsolicited comments. Fabulous. Oh, this advert was late 70s, early 80s. Even there, 41 quid. That will put you off cutting into this 7'6" pipe to find out what's inside and discovering it's 6 feet of wire and a coil wound on a wooden dowel. At least the originals were. Coil wound on a wooden dowel. The higher you put it, the better it works. It uses a single feed line, not coax, a single feed line. So the higher you put it, the longer the bit of wire is. Hang on, I'm seeing a pattern here. It works best with the matching Joy Match ATU. Yeah, you're tuning a piece of wire with a loading coil on the end, which might turn a 40-meter antenna into an 80 or a 20, more like a 20 into a 40. Okay, things like that. Snake oil. But by this time, this to say, late 70s, each system, because it's the elegant gold stove enameled VFA, at just about the same time that Hammerite brought out gold spray paint. Okay, there we go. I'm being rather ungraceful here, aren't I? Because one of the reasons I'm here is because the year before last, I was very kindly awarded the Partridge Trophy from the GQRP Club for best, and I think only article on antennas in Sprat that year. I'm not sure, there might have been another one, but I have a feeling it was best because it was the only one. Best way to win. So God bless Partridge. Anyway, so we all remember this wonderful bit of snake oil. The modern joystick VFA is something called the microvert. Now, this may not be entirely appropriate to QRP operating, but I mention it anyway because it's small. It was invented or possibly rediscovered by DL7PE, Jürgen Schäfer, and described in detail. There's an article on the internet, it is still there, I've checked, explaining in detail how it works and why it works. And he admits the basic truth: a small antenna is an inefficient antenna. It's not a world beater, okay, but it is small and easily set up. For example, in Europe, you can stick it when your garden consists of a balcony. You can put up one or several for different bands, okay? And you have to do some calculation in the sizes of making it. There's an online calculator which tells you exactly how to make it. The microvert consists of a short tubular radiator, hollow tubular radiator, specific to the band you're working on. Hollow because it works out the total surface area of the metal tube to work out the capacitance coupling to the surrounding space. You then have a wound inductor to counter the capacitance of the radiator. Then you need a precisely cut, coax feeder which also acts as a counterpoise. Only the core of the coax is connected to the inductor, which then is connected to the tubular capacitor. The shield is unconnected at the radiator end, and you have to terminate the counterpoise with a common mode RF choke and make your own. And then to a normal coax feeder. So I made one. This is the right size for 10-meter operating. Don't know if I can get this clip off. Look, gold stove enameled. You see that? Gold stove enameled. Yeah, absolutely. This was a bit of copper water pipe I had lying around in the shed. A piece of plastic tubing I had lying around the shed. So copper tube there. Small inductor just wound from standard hookup wire there. Just a few turns. It's only a few microhenries, whatever. And then to here. This is the correct length for the counterpoise. Connect that into the choke, thence to your transceiver. Wow, I wonder if it works. There it is, set up at the top of the pole in the garden. Looks smart, doesn't upset the neighbors, whatever. I designed it for 28.5 megahertz. And at 28.5 megahertz, it has an SWR of 1.1 for the analysis. So that worked well. Have I heard any DX on it? No, I've heard a lot of Europe. No DX on it. Have I had a QRP QSO on it? No, because since I made it, the band has hardly been open at a time when I've been able to get out and try it. But it receives well. Now, I did run it on Whisper, first of all, and I got these Whisper spots across Europe, 200 milliwatts. Okay, 200 milliwatts Whisper across Europe. And I looked at that, and I looked at that pencil results, and I thought, that looks like sporadic E to me. So I went online and checked the Chiltern ionosonde, and that's sporadic E, definitely. The annoying thing is, at that point, I pretty much had to take it down because I had to go somewhere else. I had to bring the thing down. And later that day, that was the sporadic E. So goodness knows what I might have been able to do had I not run out of time. But I still think it does appear to work as Schaefer describes it. Okay, he describes it as the electric field equivalent of a small magnetic loop. And I think he's probably right. And so I will certainly be doing more experimenting with this, but I say it is a very space-saving alternative. Oh, look at that. We go back to the wrong starting point. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that's given you some food for thought, and thank you for attending.
Well, thank you very much to Philip Rowe. Any questions from online, Martin? No questions. No questions.
Stunned silence. Stunned silence. Yes.
Suggestions for lofts. You talked about out in the garden, which is
Yeah. For lofts, my first attempt would always be an end-fed half-wave. You know, it's the simplest and most effective. And of course, in a loft, you can set it up as a horizontal wire. And like most other antennas, you can actually bend it around corners a bit if you need to. That's fine. I have seen setups in lofts with an end-fed half-wave antenna, and again, a secondary parasitic element set up as a director or reflector. Switching it may not be quite so easy in that case, unless you set up some kind of relay and remote switching. But that would be my first recommendation. My second recommendation would be some kind of loop antenna, not a small magnetic, a large loop, like a sort of full quad or something like that.
that wasn't a plant, but it links nicely into Philip's presentation because Philips wasn't the only antenna article to win that award. There was another one which was about a loft antenna.
That's true.
So if you go back to 2022 Sprats, there's an article in there by Enzo, who's busily pumping the key somewhere, trying to get QRP QSOs from the site. But he did an article called the Lucky Loft Antenna. So that might be something to have a look at.
Sorry, Enzo.
Any other questions?
I was going to say, I use a lot of antenna in one place, very successful. The main thing on it, two main things is QRP's fine. Is I use one of these remote ATUs on it, but I also isolate the feed to the ATU. So in effect, it's balanced, not quite, but and for the very low bands, I have another matching network. Bring it as close to that 50 ohms.
If you can arrange 10 meters of wire around as an end fed, even if bend it and then fed half wave, that will tune 20, 15 or 10 easily.
Any other questions?
I'll ask a quick one. You were talking about using parasitic elements as a directional reflector. Have you done 3 elements with a radiator in the middle?
No. Not yet, no.
I wonder if the wire lengths will be the same.
Oh yes, pretty much. I mean, you know, again, if you're not hypercritical, and certainly if you're not working at VHF or UHF, 5% more makes a good reflector, and you only need one. 5% less in length makes a good director, and you could have several.
Two of your switch director reflectors.
Yes.
Switch one way and one the other way.
You could. Yeah. It depends how tolerant your XYL is.
I don't have.
Oh, well, that's all right.
I know there is one of DX Commander's many YouTube videos where I think he did some experiments with that and proved that it does work and it works really well. So if you've got the space, then fill your boots.
Yeah.
Mate of mine did one for 40 meters with 4 switch system.
Oh, yeah.
So he could switch in any direction.
I mean,
Yes.
The switch networks are fantastic, but again, you need a bit of real estate to do it.
It's getting a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Look, folks, if there are no more questions, nothing online, Martin.
Go
on.
Just if you were staying in a hotel room, what would you suggest there?
I would suggest getting out of it into the open countryside.
Building with metal.
It depends on the construction of the building and how much noise there is internally. So many hotel rooms I've stayed in where I've enthusiastically taken along a receiver just for shortwave listening, and it's just white noise. It's just hash. On the other hand, I do have friends in the USA who travel everywhere with a simple mounting system and enough wire to make a small loop around one wall of the hotel room or something like that, and have achieved good results.
I once made a bit like your director reflector balcony in the Canary Islands with a half-wave dipole 6 meters, spaced it out, and use the balcony as a reflector and do it back into the
Steve, G4VRR makes great magnetic loops and uses them on holiday, don't you? Yeah.
Right, well, as it's officially lunchtime, I don't want to keep people from the food, so just can we once again say thank you to Philip for a fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.